Hello, and welcome to our podcast, Acts, Verse by Verse, brought to you by Teleios. This captivating podcast will detail each verse of the book of Acts, which chronicles the early history of the Christian church after Jesus' ascension into heaven. Thanks for joining us in this exciting biblical journey.
I am William Stewart, co-founder of Teleios. Welcome back to our verse-by-verse study on the book of Acts. We're on quite a journey from the time just after the glorious ascension of Christ to sit down at the right hand of God the Father to lead the church around 32, 33 AD to where the church, the initial church, the beginning of the church in Acts 2 was small in Jerusalem, led by the apostles. It was Jewish, full of signs and wonders, through a slow transition to the end of Acts, where the church is spread across the empire, the Roman Empire, mostly Greek, though some Jews, led by the elders now. Signs and wonders have gone away because that was to the Jews in the connected ministry, the early church to Christ, so they would know they were joined in message and the results to salvation. And the second generation now is starting to take over. This is probably in the early 60s AD. Precise dates aren't known. We're on Paul's second missionary journey, now going through Greece. We are in Acts 17. He's already gone to Philippi. He was chased from there after establishing a church. And let's go to the text. Now, again, I'll summarize a little for efficiency's sake. So they passed through on the Thessaloniki. They were on the sort of peninsula in the upper east portion of Greece from Constantinople, which borders on Constantinople, what is now Istanbul. And so they were in Philippi, sort of in the middle of that peninsula. They went over to Thessaloniki, which is now the major northern city of Greece, almost due north of Athens, up almost towards Macedonia, northern Macedonia now. And there was a synagogue to the Jews, and was his habit. Paul went into the synagogue first. So to the Jews first, then to the Gentiles. So this noted in Romans 1, Romans 2, we see Paul doing this. He's going to the Jews first, as Christ did. He's, I think, presenting the information to the Jews that Christ was. Of course, he knows a lot more now because Christ has died and resurrected. So as Christ went to the Jews first, so does Paul. I think it really ends here. Probably a controversial statement. We go to the Jews, to the Greeks equally. We both groups stand as one man, saved by grace through our faith alone in his death and resurrection. So there is no distinction. We go to both groups equally in our evangelistic efforts. Read Ephesians, last half of Ephesians 2. So he talks in verse 3 how Christ must have suffered and risen from the dead, and that this Jesus whom I preach unto you is Christ. And many believed. How nice. And worked with Paul and Silas. And many of the Greeks did as well, and many of the important women. Verse 5, but the Jews who didn't believe, of course, riled up. They actually, interesting, he says they were envious. And this is a promise to God that he was going to make the Jews envious in their unbelief. Back in Deuteronomy 32, he made them envious, got the city in an uproar. They assaulted a local house. The owner was Jason. They probably thought Paul and Silas were there, and it was not, but they took him to the city magistrates, saying that these, otherwise the Christians, have turned the world upside down, and they come here also. They've attacked our city, and they do contrary to the decrees of Caesar, saying there is another king. So, as we've said, if you are a ruler in Rome, no matter what level, you had two basic things you needed to accomplish to keep your job. One, get those taxes, and two, keep the peace. So Rome was very sensitive about people who didn't recognize the authority of the emperor and worship the emperor, being seen as a god at this time of history. And so by saying there was another king, it threatened the sovereignty of the emperor in that area and the potential of revolt. And Rome had known a lot of revolts, and they will know a lot more. So this was typically not looked upon favorably by a local leader. So they basically then they did end up letting Jason go after he had paid a bail, a security, and and Paul sort of left. Okay, so they sent Paul on his way. So then he went to Berea. Now Berea is we're moving south now towards Athens, and Berea is south. Came first again to the synagogue, and he says they were more noble there than in Thessaloniki. The word there, Euphgenes or Euphskimon, excuse me, in the original Greek means well designed. So noble, honorable, and they received the word readily, more readily, along with many of the Gentiles. So when the Jews in Thessalonica heard this, they decided to help the situation in Berea and their Jewish brothers, and they went and riled up those leaders as well. So again, they're not somehow denying the existence of Christ, they're not denying the resurrection. They're using lies to skip any need to deal with the message of Christ and to destroy these Christians. So they sent Paul on his way for his safety. Timothy and Silas remained. Paul went down all the way down to Athens and was then, for whatever reason, he was lonely. Probably he wanted Timothy and Silas's help to help evangelize Athens, which was such an important city. And he sent for them, and they came. And Paul did not engage in any activities per the text until they arrived. Okay, so what are we seeing here? Well, the gospel goes forward that according to the theme and the prophecy of Christ in Acts 1:8, the spread of Christianity is ongoing to the ends of the earth. And we're seeing this through the narrative, the history of Paul on his second missionary journey, probably around 53, 54 AD. They're going to the Jew first, then the Gentile, as is typical for that initial outreach of the gospel. We're seeing that the Jews hate the message, as often they do now, and fight against it, not intellectually or with good arguments, but really with violence and lies. And God is keeping Paul safe, and he escapes. He goes from, in this video, from Thessaloniki to Berea to Athens. And of course, Athens is where we'll focus on next. I think it doesn't say this, but I take the inference from the apostolic letters, particularly 1 Timothy and Titus. He's setting up churches and elders as he goes, so the church has some structure. All right, thanks for joining me today on this exciting journey. Join us next time. We'll talk about Athens. It'll be special. I'll look forward to seeing you then.
Thanks for listening to this episode of our podcast, Acts Verse by Verse. We hope you found the teachings both interesting and informative. Join us next week for another exciting episode. To listen to all episodes, please visit our website, teleiosresearch.com.